KDA? Should we show them how we do it every day?
The Popstars Houston recap was sort of our vision to create a culmination of media efforts during the season. You could call it a magnum opus in a way for Year 14, and the final product, as well as our other Year 14 productions, have all gotten some pretty overwhelmingly positive feedback. So we wanted to highlight the creative process that we take to making these videos, and we'll call this series Pro Guide.
76!
I'm Alex, the director of media here at the Spartabots. I handle the production of all of our videos from start to finish, along with a small team of helpers. We settled on our 2022 season theme all the way back in August of 2021, where our soundtrack selections were drafted and narrowed down to the final 5, for Reveal, District Events 1 and 2, DCMP, and Worlds. Our songs normally wouldn't link together as well as they did this year, but we saw an opportunity for sort of a K-pop or KDA themed season, which is a musical genre that isn't typically used in FRC recaps. I thought the songs actually worked out really well, and we wanted to try out the off-meta approach. Searching through the KDA discography, we discovered More, The Baddest, and Drum Go Dumb as viable recap titles alongside Popstars, and More would eventually be eliminated near the end of the selection and unfortunately replaced by other titles. Now fast forward to November, and the release of Arcane brings our pre-production to a grinding halt. We took one listen to the soundtrack, and many songs stood out to us as incredible contenders for reveals and recaps. And so this is when we fully decided to sort of commit to swapping over to like a Riot Games music theme, since the selections from Imagine Dragons and Denzel Curry were just too good to pass up. With that, the updated Final 5 worked its way through our pre-production process once again, with shot lists, test renders, and all. Popstars was continually at the back of our minds during this process, being the main reason why we explored the other KDA titles to begin with. All of our other productions were largely sort of test runs of the individual elements of the Final Worlds recap. As the season progressed, we got a more firm grip on the methodology for footage collection at competitions, and the Houston shot list was marginally altered accordingly to make our lives a little bit easier there. Once the plane landed in Texas though, it was grind time. We shoot pretty light when we're on the go at competitions, so there isn't a ton to cover in this section. I'll go over our reveal setup in more depth in that video, as we pulled a few interesting tricks for that production. But this video mostly focuses on our travel setup. I take one camera equipment bag, one support equipment bag, and one foam case to every event that we go to. The camera equipment bag contains our primary camera, which is a Canon EOS R, our secondary camera, which is a Canon T5i, and a variety of lenses to support both camera bodies. It also has all of the batteries for both cameras and some basic microphones, including a lavalier microphone and a shotgun microphone for audio collection if necessary. Additionally, it has enough space for a Mavic Air 2, which is taken on very select shoots, but we didn't end up using it this year and most likely won't risk it next year either. Flying a drone indoors is usually deemed pretty unsafe, and I feel like first would probably stop us. The support equipment bag contains battery chargers, an editing laptop, which is a Razer Blade 15, and its corresponding charger. Redundant media is stored throughout both bags so that I ensure I always have at least one working SD card available to shoot on. Finally, the foam case carries the DJI Ronin SC that nearly 100% of our footage is collected with. It's by far the most important piece of gear that I own, and it quite literally carries our shots. As much as people like to overlook it, pre-production is one of the biggest reasons why we can collect the footage that we do. We take the time to listen and re-listen to soundtracks, and we develop a detailed shot list for each production. The key to making these shot lists is to maintain flexibility while also being specific. Competitions present you with unforeseen circumstances all the time, so sometimes your top choice for your recap may not work out the way that you wanted it to. The Houston recap contained a couple of branches, from situations where we didn't make division playoffs all the way to a situation where we went Einstein. We didn't just write out our vision though, we brought it to life in primitive ways with test renders. Shots that were much harder usually required an edit using pre-collected footage from our previous season to make sure that we had the system down and that it would come out the way that we wanted it to. The shots themselves were planned out to flow together, and we didn't leave much room for creative liberties as it's generally pretty hard to come up with something good on the spot. Our list contains of various pulls and orbits around robot mechanisms, and a good rule of thumb is that anything that produces light can be used as a pretty good focal point as they draw the attention of the viewer in the first place. The shot list uses a general sort of game footage tag to call for any match footage or A-roll, as obviously these shot lists were written before the kickoff for 2022 even happened, and we have no idea of predicting how our matches are going to go. And so these sections were fully fleshed out in post-production instead. When we're at competitions, the robot's performance in a match is always our #1 priority. Media has to work around them, and that presents itself with some unconventional practices that we have to take. Obviously, we record each match that we play in from the field sidelines, and the Pacific Northwest District is pretty good about making sure that people can record their matches, and I've had no issues getting a clear line of sight of our robot unless it's behind the hub. For match footage, we ran a fairly wide angle for rapid react since robots are sort of all over the place and cargo flies pretty high. In previous years like Deep Space, you're able to get away with sort of a tighter angle as you can focus on the robot as it moves around, and you can zoom in when it places, for example, a hatch panel on the rocket. Recording matches itself is pretty self-explanatory. Just point the camera at the robot and make sure that you catch the cargo going in. At the end of the match, run over to the hangar zone and catch the robot climbing. If you're on the blue side, it's a lot easier as the hangar is going to be significantly closer to you, so that's where we usually like to share our climb shots. Sometimes, obviously, you just don't get it right and you have to show a red side climb. It's totally fine. Counterintuitively, though, we do like to keep the camera a little bit up higher. While it's less cinematic, it provides a clearer view of the robot and it makes filming matches a lot easier on the cameraman since you can stand up straight the entire time. At the end of the day, quality isn't too badly compromised by this change and we'll continue to run the higher angle and charged up. B-roll collection is where things can get dicey. The pit is generally very busy between matches, so you either need to film around people or film at the start and end of each competition day. We're thinking about getting our B-roll during load-in for 2023, but it might not be a viable solution to the problem, so our best advice to people is just do your best with what time and space that you already have. Houston had most of the B-roll planned out already before we got on location, so most of my time in the pits was following a shot list that we had detailed back in December of 2021. The shot list calls for a pretty specific theme of always having the camera pulling back, but that wasn't practically viable sometimes, so unfortunately that theme didn't make its way into the video as much as we wished, but most of the other pillars that we had planned out did continue to remain. All of our footage is collected on a DJI Ronin SC for stabilization, which comes in especially handy for B-roll. A lot of our shots do have to be one-take wonders as we just don't have time to make sure every little thing is perfect, and so the Ronin generally ensures that we'll get a usable shot every single time and we rarely have to apply warp stabilizer or go back and reshoot to make things look good. Alright, this is the long anticipated section. We've been getting requests to do edit breakdowns since we premiered our 2022 robot reveal, and we're finally delivering. The post-production process for this video was probably one of the heaviest jobs that we've done this season, and so we'll take you down the timeline starting from the intro. The song opens with a couple of vocal hits in the background, so we basically did what the music video does with the cuts that have a pulling back sort of movement, and we just synced it to the hits. There's nothing super complicated here, and the next little sequence is also fairly simple. It just uses our template slide and zoom transitions, which I'll break down in a different video. There's a pretty cool series of metallic hits right before the vocals come in, and so we use them to our advantage by syncing a couple of pictures to them. As the first verse continues, the footage I chose is also pretty simple. It's just shots of Kronos shooting balls into the hub. Now on a couple of the repeating words though, where they go like bad gal, 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 etc., I thought it would be cool to add this sort of flowy back and forth motion to the video, and it ended up turning out pretty good, and it works pretty well as a transition. Now as the song transitions into Ari's pre-chorus, it drops into cut time, so we start showing the viewer some smoother and slower B-roll footage. This serves a dual purpose. It, first of all, conditions the viewer to a more chill pre-chorus section of the song, and it makes the game footage that we show on the chorus drop feel just a little bit more interesting. This section is also all hard cuts except for the slide transition on the very first little bit, and the rest is just synced up to the synth hits in the background. On the last couple of snare drum notes though, we swap over to showing pictures since video would be going by too quickly to clearly see anything anyways. On the chorus drop, there's a couple of slide transitions that are synced to the low synth growls that you hear in the background, and the last slide transition sort of drops you into the chorus as the beat drops as well. It's a small but effective detail that makes the moment all the more impactful. And the chorus itself is, again, fairly simple, comprised mostly of game footage and hard cuts until the snare hits in the second half, during which I use a zoom transition on each hit instead. Most of our recaps have an autonomous highlight section where we show a full unedited 15-second clip of our best auto run, and this recap is no different. We figured Akali's would be a good way to introduce auto, so we dropped the clip right in after that line. The change to a rap beat also helps convey to the reader that auto is a very special section of the game that we want to celebrate. We had to fill just a few seconds of extra time there at the end of the rap verse, so I added in a second clip of a different auto run to just wait out the last little bit. The second pre-chorus is edited much in the same way as the first one, but it's cut short so we only get to show a few shots before we're dropped right into another chorus. This chorus is, again, identical to the first, so I don't need to cover it again. As chorus 2 ends with the words down, 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 we match those, again, with downward slide transitions into some travel and venue B-roll. And this is where we initially planned to show a line selection footage, but unfortunately I wasn't actually able to record a line selection. So instead we opted to feature our friends over at 254 running out to the Einstein field to fill the time. Now this last little part of the final pre-chorus is probably why most of you clicked this video. It's the sweeping shot of a neon sign that lights up with the words Hopper Division semifinalists as the chorus is about to drop, followed by a colorful supernova to send you into the last chorus. The neon sign was something that we had to test pretty thoroughly in pre-production, so we made a series of test renders that said Einstein finalists instead, but it's the same overall idea with the techniques. You'll see in this version that only the Einstein name itself is a neon sign, but we instead opted to make the entire thing neon in the final one. The 3D model was made possible by a cool little Blender plugin called Neoner, which is able to convert text into neon signs and even create a backdrop wall of sorts for you. From there, it's just a matter of keyframing the lights to turn on in sequence and program in some camera movements. My skill in 3D rendering is pretty low, so a lot of you can probably tell that it's by no means an amazing render, but it gets the job done and it adds some flair to an otherwise boring shot. The explosion graphic was actually pulled from KDA's music video for Popstars. We originally had plans to make a very similar graphic on our own as a little Easter egg, but as production dragged on, I figured that it would be easier to just insert the KDA graphic. The start and end are covered by a white frame that fades in and out very quickly to mask the cut, and it honestly worked out better than I expected it to. The final chorus is filled with playoff footage and accompanied by match scores in the bottom corner. Aside from that, the footage selection is nothing out of the ordinary and follows the general theme that we already established in the first few choruses. A lot of you are probably also wondering how we make the outros, and that's something that I'm also going to be covering in a dedicated video, as the outro is fairly complicated and probably requires a very, very in-depth explanation to make sure that people are actually able to understand it. Now obviously the nature of this video means that I can't go over every little detail of our production, but we hope that this breakdown helped you understand what goes into our videos and you're able to apply it to your own productions in the future. But with that, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time on the DCMP Recap Breakdown.